This is what I was told. And I'm sorry. I was told that we were going directly into our next speaker because, which I guess would save time at the end of the day. That's the way I understood.
No questions?
כך אני הבנתי שאין שאלות, שזה הולכים ישר, לא?
Okay.
Okay, we'll take one question. Okay, what? You haven't asked a question? So let's make two quick questions and then we'll go into that, please.
Thank you all for great presentations. I have a question for Michal. I'm trying to make sense of the diaspora without any kind of attachment to like the actual territory of homeland, and I'm curious if that has something to do with. I know, like for Iraqis, Jews were involved in the nationalist movement and writing literature and things like that, and Moroccans had an attachment to the king. And so I'm wondering, for Syrians, is it like, what would the context of nationalism or lack of nationalism, or the shape of nationalism in Syria, and did that affect a relation to an actual or imagined homeland?
Do you want to take all the questions and then everybody?
Yes, let's take one last question.
Okay, my question is for Sarina, which, by the way, you gave an excellent presentation on Syrian Jewry in New York. But my question relates to a part of your presentation that you had in your presentation but did not talk about because of time constraints, I suppose. I noticed very quickly that you had the name of Judy Felkar, yes, whom, as you know well, was responsible for taking a lot of Syrian Jews out of Syria. And the question I have to you is, why did such an amazing, strong, populous community of Syrian Jews, I think, if I remember right, 80,000 Syrian Jews living in New York, why did they not make an effort to get the remnants of Syrian Jewry out of Syria, and they allowed or let Judy Felkar, who's a Canadian, do the job for her? I should say. Thank you.
So actually there's a few answers to that question. I don't want to say that the Syrian community itself was not acting at all, because they really were. It's just that this is a community, you have to understand that they were apolitical based on their heritage in Syria. As Dhimmi, you lived under the radar. You didn't cause waves. You weren't political. You didn't vote. You didn't draw attention to yourself. And being assimilated in America, it took them a long time to understand that they could voice their concerns in America and there wouldn't be consequences, that the consequences might be positive. So they learned actually from Judy Felkar in the fact that they were able to go and lobby their congressmen and their senators to get movement. I actually write about this in my upcoming book, Branching Out from Sepharad, in which I actually spend a lot of time on this particular subject, where they actually, Judy Felkar is part of the underground movement, but then the actual 1992 airlift, there was a committee on the rescue of Syrian Jewry that was formed in the community, in which there was a lot of pressure on the administration and the State Department to get that airlift and to get Assad to open up the doors so that they could absorb those immigrants. So I don't want to say that they were completely oblivious to it. It just took time for them to react and realize that they really did have some power to do something. That said, I want to just go to address her question, which had to do with this, the homeland issue, and that is the fact that in Syria, when the Jews have left Syria, it was still part of the French mandate, so there wasn't a nationalist movement. Syria became a country years after this group had left. It was much, much later that Syria became an actual country, the Republic of Syria. So there wasn't a nationalist movement the way there was in other countries. I'm sorry, now you can ask your question.
My understanding was that it wasn't an airlift when it got the Syrian.
Right.
She did it from destiny one at a time.
Yes.
Right? So
yes. But they were doing financing people coming out secretly. They were smuggling people out. I know. I was in 1973 before I married my husband. I was dating someone who was of Syrian descent, and he said, you know, he would disappear for months on end. He said, "I'm going to Beirut. I have to smuggle people out." So people were doing things. It just wasn't very public. I don't want to say that people aren't doing things. I think it was just very clandestine and very quiet. And with that, I want to let Michal answer.
Yeah, thank you. No, so I'll just add to that, besides for the history of the way that Syria developed as a country and the history of the Ottoman Empire, firstly, I'll add that I think it is important to start doing more comparative work between, like, you just mentioned the Iraqi diaspora and the Moroccan one and the Syrian one. So I see it as like a future step that we should all, as scholars, be cross-pollinating and making that those comparisons. I think in the case of this community, the fact that so many people moved so early, relatively, to the United States, and you already had people moving here in in the really, really early 1900s, lessened also the nationalistic attachment as opposed to other immigrant groups that perhaps started moving away from countries after the establishment of the State of Israel or later political context. And also in the case of this community, I'll just add another thing that perhaps the fact that there's like 4 or 5 different countries at this point that have kind of joined to make one community, because I didn't talk so much about the reasons for this, I just described it. But perhaps the fact that there's like 4 or 5 countries, people from 4 or 5 countries that are living in one community has also served to reduce or perhaps a possible reason for this low nationalistic level, but definitely something to consider and keep writing about. Thank you. Eddie, do you want to say something? You good? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The final and special performance session. First of all, I thank all the speakers. The final session is a special performance session. Dr. Judith R. Cohen from York University. It's called "Do You Mean Moroccan Ladino? Moroccan Sephardic Songs Emigrate to Montreal and Toronto." Dr. Judith Cohen is an ethnomusicologist and singer specializing in Sephardic